Dark and Darker VR. That's what I'm calling it because it doesn't really have a name yet. The team that made A Township's Tale, a game that I enjoyed heavily in the past, I made an entire series of it, is now working on Project 2. Project 2 is a temporary name for the project they have been working on for about a year now, and I'm here to tell you in a nutshell what they have been working on. And what I'm personally excited about, of course. And at the end of the video we're gonna address a little bit of drama, okay? That surrounds Alta and Township and the company as a whole, and how people think about them after spending a lot of time in Township, basically. So we're gonna cover a bunch of subjects today, which is gonna be, how is the game loop gonna be, what are the weapons, the combat, what kind of enemies are there, the level design, what are they going for, and how your character is built up, how does it work. We're gonna talk a little bit about abilities, immersion, which is going to be big in this game, I just feel it in my bones. I'm gonna talk about the inventory, and a little bit about the multiplayer, about the quests, then about the loot, how that works, and then we're gonna touch on the drama a little bit. So the game loop, it's gear up, go in a dungeon, collect loot, and PvP, alone or together, and then extract, or die. And that of course sounds a lot like Dark and Darker, but for the sake of repetitiveness I will stop referring to Dark and Darker from here on out, because this is gonna be its own game in VR, and we love VR, we don't love desktop. So the weapons, so far I've only seen a sword, a dagger, a mole and a shield. The ability to dual wield seems to be a passive ability in the future, that's what I read on Discord at least, and there will probably be way more weapons added. These are just in to test the basics of the game, to get some functions pushed in, you know, stuff like that, developer things. Personally, I'd love to see the bow in the future, to see how that works, and I'd love to see how they tackle certain aspects of a weapon, like if it's really long, how you're gonna balance it, stuff like that. I would really love to see that. So the devs talked about combat a lot. The way they spoke about it made me think they're really putting in some effort into making fighting as random and fun as they possibly can. That being said, I know that fighting in VR can be gimmicky, it's like you're hitting a wall. So once you reach the enemies will respond to you, that's at least what they're trying to make. The enemies will respond to you by dodging away or hitting you away when you start swinging like a maniac. So in the game right now, as I've seen, is just the classic mechanics such as dodging, parrying, and don't forget about blocking of course, and all that stuff is in. I've seen it work, it works, and I don't know what to say about it, man. So what I've seen as well in the combat department is stealth gameplay. So I did see some stealth action, which maybe fits more in the ability category, maybe. We also got a snippet of PvP there, which I don't know how much it's faked, I don't know how well it works, but the guy stabbed the guy and he died, which essentially is PvP, I guess. So talking about enemies, this early in development, they already dished out multiple sorts of enemies that all possess a different sort of characteristic. I guess that's also to more easily finalize certain mechanics that are in development, because you need to test it on all sorts of enemies, right? Low, high, small, fast, long range, whatever. As far as I know, they covered 5 types. So we've got the regular good old skeleton that will stab, swing and flail or whatever at you, and while they're doing that, they're trying to dodge your combo attacks or even stomp you away when you start to get a bit too frenzied, you know. So that's good for a little bit of interaction with the minions, I guess. They thought that through at least. Then we have the classic archer skeleton, a ranged enemy. Instead of just standing there shooting you right in the face from like half an inch distance, they're gonna stab you with the arrow, retreat, and re-engage you with range attacks in the distance. So I guess they're aware of how the games nowadays play more often than not, and they really want to make it an interactive fight with every different minion that is out there, which is a good sign. It doesn't say anything right now how it plays, but you know, it's a good detail. And then we got the player's worst fear. An enemy that really nobody enjoys having in a game. Our 8-legged friend, the spider. I guess they added it to test crouching attacks and such, but they still creep me out, so moving on. So we got some flying enemies as well. We've seen them, but they look a little bit goofy. But obviously, it is to test the NPC pathing maybe and the player interaction with enemies in the sky. So that is fine. And then we also have our favorite kind of enemy, easy to beat, hard to avoid, fast skeletons that only use their fist. I guess they call them fodder skeletons, I think that's what they call it. So I guess these are to test the pathing with close range enemies so they don't glitch out, whatever. I don't know. They made them for a reason, and I know they all possess certain characteristics that we all want to see in games. So what I hope to see is combat that evolves as you go. So we need dodging in there. We need to have dodging an attack to be rewarding. If you parry attack, it needs to be rewarding. It needs to be really hard to beat enemies by just hitting them in the face all the time, because it should have an RPG element to it that gives you certain buffs for performing well executed actions. And that's what I hope to see in the game. So people are actually encouraged to dodge, parry, block, weave, whatever, you know. So let's hope for that in the future. So we're going to talk about the level design now. So far, the Project 2 seems to be going for a dark fantasy style game. Despite the graphics right now, if you've seen them, that look like a cartoon, they seem to be aiming at a ritualistic and dark atmosphere for the game. No doubt that the cartoony look will stay, because that's what they're good at. That's what they should be doing, because it's a timeless look. They should definitely go for that. But it's gonna be way more dark. So much dark, I saw, that you might need a torch to even light your ways through the narrow tunnels, the catacombs and stuff like that. And talking about catacombs, the level designer, heavily inspired by the Paris catacombs, he said, in combination with an anime show called Blame. He said it like blame. It just spells blame. I don't know anything about anime, so don't hang me if I said it wrong. But they seem to want to go for a claustrophobic feeling dungeon, while at the same time having the open areas to take a breather. And the dungeons are inspired by the Paris catacombs, and the open areas are inspired by the anime Blame. And then we have the designers that seem to know what they're doing, because they're showing off the level editor that they work with, and it looks kind of intuitive, I guess. So that means they can create a lot of content with the same tools, which I think they were missing in the Township Tale department, but we're not gonna talk about that, okay? So they already showed some work off that they already made, which is, I think, looks beautiful. I think it's a good look. I think they should continue this path. And then they seem to work a lot with base concepts. So they design a certain look or a certain area and how scaled they want it and how they want it to look. And then the art team just goes ham on it. They just go ham on it. And if you can see this cave stuff, for example, they created this cave and then the artist just went berserk on it, and then they added more parts to that cave system. And then they're probably gonna build up the game in that way. So we also got the fact that verticality and the feeling of scale is gonna play a big part in the designing of the level, because I think that's important to the designer. He mentioned it specifically in one of the videos. He wants verticality, which I love, because it's pretty absent from a lot of VR games. Multiple floors, looking down at your enemies, looking up at your enemies in multiplayer games seems very non-existent nowadays. So I'm glad they're going for verticality, and that kind of makes me worried about how the monsters are going to interact with the verticality, because, you know, verticality is not easy to program as far as pathing for NPCs. So as you know, in certain games that NPCs just stop. They just look at you and are like, you're up there, I'm sorry, you have the high ground, you're gonna win, this is you now, this is all you, this is your game, this is your show, just shoot me in the face. And you know, I hope that they're gonna do something else, maybe have the minions hide or have the minions throw shit at you to knock you off. I don't know, something like that. It's an issue for later. Buff shrines will also be scattered around the level, but, you know, it will be part of the game loop. Buff shrines, it's buff shrines. You get buffs, it's a shrine. Shrine buff, buff shrine, Shia LaBeouf. So far, the character model seems to be able to be customized, equipped with different armor. He looks a little bit hungry. He's a little bit of a skinny boy, but Does it really matter? No. You're gonna have bulky armor, it's gonna be amazing. There are gonna be multiple characters probably, it's gonna be fine. So you also have an ability wheel that seems very much alike the Blade and Sorcery ability wheel. They say never change a winning recipe, you better steal it well than create it poorly. I don't know what the English saying for that is, but you know what I mean. And some abilities have been teased. It's like double jump, stealth, and a couple of passive abilities have been teased, but you know, that's all subject to just change, or they can add a lot of things. Don't worry about that yet. Stats like strength, dex, int, stuff like that, the classic RPG thingies, seem to be part of the game already. They're working as you expect, so when you successfully extract, they give you XP and you level up and you can spend the points. How this will work in a looter extraction game, I don't know, because I don't know why they would add leveling to a game where everyone needs to be on the same ground as the rest. So I hope they're just gonna stick with putting stats on gear and not being able to spend points on character, because I would hate to see that. I don't want imbalance. If somebody has a little sword and the other guy has a little sword and they're both equal, nobody should have a benefit besides the one that is more skilled in what he does. Now we're gonna talk about immersion. This is a subject I'm excited to cover, because knowing the Alta Dev team and the time I spent in a Township's Tale, they can mess up a lot of things, but Immersion is definitely not one of them. Township is the living proof of immersive VR gameplay. If you never tried it, go in there. It's gonna be a mess, but you'll notice every single thing they made is very immersive, very intuitive, in a sense that it feels like a mini game all together doing the certain things that they added. It was way ahead of its time, so much so that I will address it a bit more in the drama part of the video, but we're gonna get to that. Going back to the subject, immersion. Project 2 is showing off some insanely good looking hand interaction with individual fingers touching objects, as you would expect, but is not default for VR titles nowadays. This one looks really well made, and as you can see in the footage, there's some hand movement going on there that is just insanely good looking. So looting seems to be able to be done by grabbing the objects directly and releasing it. So basically you get your hand projected on it if you do it from a range, then you can pull it towards you and then you release it and you loot it. So this looks a little bit like early stage stuff to me. I'd love to see the force grab method implemented. So there's a guy, I forgot his name, I'll put it in the comments down below. There's a guy out there that made a mechanic that if you force grab something, it doesn't go into your hands, it goes in front of you and then you can grab it. I would love to see that mechanic added to the game to get a more of a fluent and interactive thing going on, and that you can grab the weapons however you want to before you actually have it in your hands. So if you ever had these VR games where if you hit something it just doesn't have the oomph to it, so in this game I think they're trying to solve it by adding a lot of particle effects to whatever you're trying to destroy at that point. So now it seems to leave certain trails in the game like splinters, dust, whatever. So that's nice. It's a bit of viscerality. That's not a word, but we're gonna call it that anyway. So stabbing also works as you would expect. It penetrates barrels. You know, what else to expect from it? It's nothing special, but it looks good anyway. Weapons also feel weighted. At least that's what they told me in a video, but it's really hard to judge from the video, as the guy in the video already said. But it's so important for a sword fighting game, for swords and weapons to be weighted. If everything weighs the same, it's gonna suck. Even though a lot of games make the weapons weigh too much, because I don't know if you ever seen a guy fight with a long sword or any big sword, but dude, that goes fast.
Helicopter, helicopter!
But for the sake of balance, I guess we need to just make them heavy as shit. I'm excited about the fact that they made enemies interactable. You can push away their weapons with your weapon, meaning that they have ragdoll bodies that you can push around. Even though it seems like a feature that all VR games already have, it's still not a given. So I hope that eventually they're gonna get some nice VR implemented gameplay in there, like kicking the skeletons, maybe pushing them off, turn them into a ragdoll. It's gonna be great if they implement it in the right way. I'm very excited to see where that goes. So what's also a really fun detail that I saw that is gonna be a little bit freaky, the enemies will track you with their heads. They will look at you bloodthirsty right in the eye before they pounce at you, which is gonna be creepy. So I like that detail, so I hope they add more of that. That being the last thing I said about the immersion will definitely not be the last one. I promise you that. I've seen what Alta can do, and if they do that with this game, with a solid game loop, they're gonna be golden. We're gonna talk about the inventory now. Your inventory is just a basic 2D image with slots on it. Your weapons will be holstered on the side. Nothing special going on here. Grab a loot. You just grab it from a range or up close, and then you release it, and then it appears in your inventory. And I'm not doubting that they will one day make this a very satisfying event where it just turns into gold, or the gold coins just bling, just, you know, it's gonna be a something. So going on with the multiplayer, there's not much going for it. It's multiplayer, you can load in together and fight each other. But we don't know much about the PvP yet. I hope there's one day going to be a video explaining the PvP, and especially how they're going to prevent sword wiggling and cheesy combat tactics. They definitely need to look into making the combat as rewarding as possible, as interactive with the other players as possible. So I hope that the combat team will address this as soon as possible, as early as possible in the game. If you mess up PvP in a game like this, you basically already destroyed the game before it even exists. And I can promise you that it is what it is. If you don't do the sword fighting right, it's gonna suck. Quests! There seem to be quests in the game already. It's very early on. It's not really special, to be honest. It's in a really early state. There's a kill quest, and if you complete it, it works. You get XP, I guess. I don't know what you get. But it's early. It's too early to talk about. So we already touched a bit about the looting. I don't think there's a lot going on. There's chests in the game, I guess. We didn't see a lot of chests appearing in the footage for some reason. If they were chests, there was loot. They can grab it. They can release it. Make it appear in the inventory. It's basic. It's basic. Not much to talk about yet. I hope they're gonna add a very good loop to this. I hope they're gonna make a gold sink. Looting should be rewarded. You should be able to explore and get rewarded as you go. There shouldn't be too much hot zones where everyone is gonna go, where it's just a bunch of PvP and then everyone leaves. It should be spread out. Reward exploring. That's what I think. So now we're gonna cover a bit of the subject that I think is important, a little bit of the drama that was going on. And to understand it a bit, you'll have to know what a township tale is. A township tale is basically a sandbox game where collecting resources and crafting is the biggest guideline in the game. That's the game loop. The game is heavily community driven and makes players interact with each other and hopefully start a small functional community together. So Alta, the creators of a township, have dropped a lot of balls if it goes for communications towards their community. As for today, a lot of promised features did not even come out. The updates they push out consistently mostly consist of cosmetics that you can buy, which is, you know, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth, but they need to support their business. I guess this project would never have happened if they didn't do that, so you know. They had a subscription function as well, so you could show their support for developing the game. I've personally been a member for a long time. I possess a lot of their in-game currency, which is called Talums. I never spend it in a township, so I've got it in their launcher, in their database. So every time you get the talents for supporting them, but their priorities really seem to be completely different. Like they created Talum sinks, basically. So the community didn't take the announcement of Project 2 that well, of course, because, you know, their game is not even finished. I have my theories on why this team decided to stray away from creating Township, and it most likely has to do with the scale of the game. So personally, I was excited about their change of idea. So I asked the CEO of Alta to address some of the basic concerns that players might have surrounding this project and a Township Tale. So my first question to him was, are you guys still working on a Township Tale, or did the main team shift towards Project 2? So the answer was yes, still working on a township tale. So he says we have multiple full-time developers on it, though a majority of our team is focused on P2. So my guess is their main attention is now on Project 2 and finishing it. And I still have my reasons why that is, but we're gonna get into that later. So the second question would be the support people have given you in the form of talums, so what I talked about, the currency of township, will it somehow be useful in Project 2? His answer was, my gut feeling is the answer will be no. SP2 is designed to be an independent product, which I think is bullshit because I think talums are more a currency for their launcher, because it does show in their launcher as well, than it is a product for a specific game. But that's up to them to decide. They're gonna get the backlash, they're not gonna get the backlash, I don't know. So, but they also said they literally never talked about it internally. So this is all subject to change. So then I had my third question, is what is the main reason to focus on a second game? Why did they decide to just make a second game instead of finishing a township? So, he said, a much harder question. Moving from a single game company to a multi-game company is something we knew would be difficult for many of the community. So I guess they'll lose in trust that they're gonna finish a township. We have scaled up as a company and investing all our resources into ATT. A township's tale simply made less sense than working on a new project, which I understand. So they still want to develop ATT, just put less effort into it. That's basically what he's saying. That being addressed, my gut feeling says a township is not going to be rapidly developed, because I think they're going to focus their attention mainly on this game. I think he's making it I think he's putting a band-aid on the fact that that's the case. But as I said, I'm happy with that in a sense. A township tale was way too big of a project for anyone to create in a live supported environment. So I'm really excited to see what a team that has the ability to create such a world with such interactions can do when the project shrinks down into something way more manageable, like Project 2. They can finalize mechanics, they can finalize the game loop, which in Township was a very vague goal to obtain. That's my personal view on this. You can disagree with me, it doesn't matter. Leave it in the comments if you wanna just, complain about it. It's fine. He also went along and admitted to having poor communications with their community in the time of a township, which I think they're trying to rebuild, seeing that they made devlogs weekly. They're trying to be transparent. They're really communicating with their people in the chat. And it's a difficult thing to do because a lot of people have opinions and you cannot always do something with their opinions, but they're trying to rebuild it. So as excited as I'm seeing this project come to life, I warn you not to reward the devs that don't finalize their products. Don't flop open your wallet right away and wait for people to cover the game for you once it's playable. Get a good sense of what they made. What are you gonna spend your money on? Don't reward devs that don't finish projects. So it's gonna take a while before it's released. So be patient. So all that being addressed, what would you guys love to see this game be called? Because it's called Project 2, it's a temporary name. What do you like to see it called? So, I hope to see that in the comments. And I hope you guys know what you're getting into. Because, it's a very early stage game. But I'm really excited for it. And have a good one. And I'll see you in the next video.